we're going to take the opportunity to explore some of these topics a little bit more. And if you're like me, your brain is probably frying at this moment based on the amount of information that you just received in a very, very short space of time. So I'm going to suggest that we start maybe back at the beginning. And Bobby, thank you for setting the scene for us and giving us context around the journey that RBC has been on over these last, more than 10 years of active investment. It's only now, it seems, that it's becoming a reality for the business in the sense that we're moving now into a point where we can confidently apply AI into the business as a whole. And I think particularly, in capital markets, the sensitivity around decision-making processes, the importance for us to create the explainability, the auditability, the reliability to allow us to go forwards with confidence. What was it that tipped RBC over the line to say we're ready now? Now we're ready to go at scale. What do you think it was that got you to that point? And what was the hard part about making that decision, if indeed I've characterized it the right way?
If we think about what got us to the point of why now and how to scale up, scale out, if we take a big step back again, going on 30 years at Royal Bank of Canada, it is the most exciting moment to be in the business. It's the most exciting moment to be alive, where we believe at the bank that generative AI will impact every industry, every role, every workflow, everything. And again, we had the experience of going through a reinforcement learning journey. And back in 15, 16, that was a big happening, explainability around RL. We had a patented RL platform. Why is that important? It caught the attention of every regulator around the world, and we spent endless amounts of hours with regulators explaining our process, and that gave us the reps to get ahead of this next layer, create an office of AI, create one front door for AI for all of capital markets, underpin that with an AI governance committee that subsumed the governance of Royal Bank, identical to Royal Bank of Canada governance, ethical AI being very important. Thinking through the risks at the front end for us and deeply thinking through the risks and understanding the risks is really important. We can spend months on that. And then when we get to that period and we get the confidence and we have the right client and commercial focus and right client and commercial lens on something, we fly. And we just fly. And that was the capital markets research. It aligned. Our CEO supported and loves research. There's a client and commercial aspect to it. We had the expertise. We had studied the next layer. And as we started running our POCs, it worked. And it was working. And our analysts were gaining productivity. So then the go all in and then really think about and think through the human aspect. So if you fast forward of how, when you do enable people wall to wall, and you give them a cutting edge capability, you're unlocking bottoms up imagination and vision and creativity. You're unlocking use cases you would never be able to uncover if you had a top down approach. So going all in, end to end, enabling your people and seeing the benefits of their imagination and their innovation, the importance of AI education, the importance of augmenting our people with AI, augmenting them to compete at the highest level, deliver for clients, and drive commercial outcomes. And hand over heart, we have a really ambitious growth CEO of capital markets that has really ambitious goals for us. So does the head of the investment bank, and so does everybody. So how do you actually speed up getting to those results? How do you speed up execution? How do you go faster? So augmenting our people with AI capabilities was really important. And what we did is, and what was really, really important culturally, and we believe we have a strong culture and a culture as a true competitive differentiator, was stand up our AI champions. And we have an AI champion community, which is 100 people across 8,000 people in capital markets that were selected and nominated by the Capital Markets Operating Committee or the Global Markets Operating Committee. And it was a true role elevation, role empowerment with a responsibility and accountability to three things: AI education and scaling education. Evidence use cases with a lens of reusability and scalability, and strengthen AI culture. How do you know you're strengthening AI culture? It's reflected in the usage. And we measure everything in terms of AI adoption, AI usage. Having RBC Borealis, and James knows well RBC Borealis, again, we're very lucky that we have people that work at RBC that are actually AI professors. And 1 week is AI education, starting with what is AI to then going deep on prompt engineering in 3-part series, but prompt engineering and evidence of use case. Prompt engineering part 2, evidence of use case. So this has been going on for many months to really strengthen the AI culture and support our people on the really important point of when is it right to go all in? How do you support your people, and how do you invest in our people to make sure that they're a big part of the future and shaping the future?
I love the way you've outlined that as an all-in approach where there's a will to make it happen, to make it work, to make it real, all the way up and down the organization. It must have required a tremendous amount of alignment to drive it. To your point, it wasn't just a question of the CEO declaring it. It was about getting the engagement and the buy-in and the support and putting the infrastructure around that. What was the hardest thing to make happen to bring that to reality from your perspective, Bobby?
The hardest thing to make happen is to not have people be afraid of the machine. To have people really realize that there's major benefits of leveraging AI. I think Jensen says it and we hear it. Those who acquire AI education and leverage AI will replace those that don't. Yeah. And how do we get that message out to our people? And how do we get people to try the tool, try the capability, apply it to their workflows? It's the human aspect. I mean, it's a really important thing to concentrate on because it's data privacy, yes, output errors, yes, many different risk considerations, but the people part of it is the top consideration and the top sensitivity, making sure that we're educating the people, people can upskill, people can retool, and hand over heart, we need our people all developing new habits, new capabilities, new education to deliver for clients and drive the results. But it's the human aspect that's very hard to. We still have people, believe it or not, that have never signed on to Aiden. And how do we win over the hearts and minds? And how do we make sure that people see that there's a benefit for them to deliver for clients?
Love that, yeah. I used the term reinforcement learning earlier. It seems to me that when we're talking about major change and helping our teams adopt, we have to show them success. We have to show them evidence that says, by investing your time, energy, and effort and getting familiar and learning this, it's going to be worth it because look at the results that we're already seeing, the evidence to support it. I think that's crucial, and I wanted to bring James into that part of the discussion because you said something really important, James, which is the mission at NVIDIA is not so much about selling more hardware, although of course that's how you get rewarded for your effort, but actually the work that you do is focused on that enablement angle. It's really about helping people embrace this new reality and making it work for them. Now, coming from that hardware up perspective, I'm wondering, James, what it is that you've discovered is the key to getting people to a point where they are not afraid of the machine and they're not focused solely on the technology, but they're understanding how to adopt and embrace what NVIDIA is doing as an enabler for this new wave. What does that look like from your point of view, James? What's the key to success, do you think?
Thanks, Peter. I think to echo Bobby's point, the elephant in the room is not actually the technology piece that's really hard. It's the people problem that's the hard part. It's getting an agentic use case or deployment or solution that can solve a valuable problem that you can actually validate and inspect and introspect and backtest, but actually getting that into a production environment. That's actually one of the most challenging things that actually we run into on a regular basis, especially across FSI, in terms of getting use cases actually into production, is if they're not already in that production environment or ready to go as a POC is completed, it is very difficult to get it there. And why is that? Well, it's not just that people are a little, they might have some fear or a little maybe have some anxiety from with using Gen AI tools, but there's some real actual reasons, like actual implications around using these tools. Bobby mentioned, I think earlier in his talk, where human in the loop is actually really important, really relevant for the use cases. That's something that if you don't incorporate into your pipeline, if you don't actually have the human operators be able to see and introspect and say, okay, we've just executed this tool call. Are you ready to move to the next step? For a lot of operators, unless they can visually see and actually have that direct engagement, there's very much a lack of trust that will actually happen within an organization, and that'll boil up to the entire organization. But then beyond that, one of the things that of course, using things like ChatGPT and Anthropic, you can really get those models to really generate whatever you want, and that can be useful information, but that can also be not useful information, and that can potentially be even harmful information. And depending on what part of the business that you're interacting with, that could be maybe fine if it's a completely internal use case. But a lot of the times, especially if there's something that could even possibly get to the point where you're actually making this customer-facing or client-facing, then you have these additional risks around your actual reputation of your entire business, which is where things like guardrails come in, and really thinking about how you're actually going to not only just utilize your LLMs, but also to be able to lock down your Gen AI solutions so that it really focuses on one train. One way to think of Gen AI, I think that I like to mention as kind of a way to resonate with software developers, is it's kind of like the inverse of writing, of actually programming in Python scripts. If you don't do anything at all and you just have an idea and you're going to write your Python code, it doesn't do anything. But with Gen AI, if you just ask a question, you will get a response. It might not be exactly the response that you're expecting, and if you tweak your response just a little bit, it might go off the rails into a different direction. So with Gen AI, there's very much this focus that if you want to make sure your model is actually behaving correctly, you do have to program. It's just a new kind of programming. They're called LLM.txt files. They're called guardrail scripts and Golang. And these systems allow you to restrict and guide your Gen AI solutions to actually focus on the things that you want that solution to focus on, rather than potentially the whole universe. So those are kind of like two really big things. But I think going back to the human element, and especially definitely in production, a lot of FSI organizations, a lot of banks, a lot of trading teams, they do have a lot of existing infrastructure. They do have infrastructure teams. They do have infrastructure organizations. They have teams that are definitely set up and positioned to be able to help take these use cases into production. But there are a lot of different steps within an organization. For example, with RBC, there is model validation. There is model risk. There's all of these different steps that are required to make sure that the data that's being processed, either client data or trading data, is being processed correctly and effectively and legally. And these steps, while being incredibly important and very important from a regulatory perspective, they sometimes can be a little bit slow. And with Gen AI and Gen AI applications coming into production, some of those steps do need to be potentially revisited and augmented to be able to improve their velocity of those reviews. Those reviews are still very critical. They're mission critical for banking and trading firms. But they need to be able to move at a faster pace.
Thank you, James. I'm conscious that you've seen a lot of projects now, specifically in financial services, and we're talking today about a project that's gone extremely well. But you've probably seen a bunch of projects that haven't gone so well, and they've come to some kind of grinding halt at some point. What are the learnings that you could extract from that might help our audience avoid some of the pitfalls based on the experience that you've gained to date?
Yeah, so definitely I think a repeat of question one, which is make sure you're working with the infrastructure teams to be able to make sure that you can actually get this possible solution or use case into something like production. There's a lot of different Gen AI solutions that can exist. There's a lot of great tools that we're building at NVIDIA, things like Riva, text-to-speech, ASR models, code generation models. We have a lot of capabilities that we've been building and building with our partners. However, not all of those tools are suited for banks. Not all of those tools are suited for trading firms. Sometimes there are regulatory compliance restrictions that just make it harder to be able to deploy certain kinds of solutions to production. NVIDIA, I like to say this, NVIDIA used to be a gaming company. It still is a gaming company, but it very much is gone through a series of evolutions, which means that our own even internal understanding of FSI and our own internal understanding of regulated industry is something that is relatively new for us. Sometimes we think a solution is straightforward and easy to integrate into a bank or into a financial institution. But once we actually go through that process and go through the motions, we realize really quickly, oh, wait a second, we can't just give somebody a NIM in a bank and let them run with it. We actually have to get this through Artifactory. We have to be able to deploy the actual model containers. We have to go through JFrog. We have all of this entire internal automation systems that have to go through. And sometimes those pieces of the puzzle are actually more complicated than the actual solutions. So one of the things that we're actually doing at NVIDIA right now, and this is something that's really important, is that we are actually doing all of this work internally ourselves. So we're going through this process. We have a lot of the same regulatory restrictions, and we have a lot of the same infrastructure components. We use OpenShift. We use CoreOS. We have a model LLM gateways. And what we're doing is we're doing that internally because we need to be able to learn how these end enterprises are, what the challenges that they're running into are, and how we can get ahead of them. So when I mentioned before that NVIDIA is a software company, the reason for why that we're a software company is not because we sell software. We do, but it's not really the main point of NVIDIA. The reason why we focus so much on software is because by building on top of all of those lower level software frameworks, we're able to make sure that, and regardless of what end consumer or end use one of our frameworks or tools could end up being in, that our hardware and our software solutions going all the way up the stack are perfectly suited and geared to be optimized for that solution. Whether that's Gen AI, whether that's HPC, whether that's fluid dynamics, whether that's mechanical engineering, what have you.
Very important point. And focusing on getting ahead of the production challenges right from inception of the project really speaks to the alignment issue that you were raising, Bobby. But I want to take a turn here into the technology challenges themselves. And I thought, Nataraj, you raised a really interesting point about the importance of dual mode in the context of data and databases. And we've seen the evolution of vector databases as a category in their own right, emerging through generative AI and being very valuable in that context. But the application of generative AI into capital markets has not been quite so straightforward. And of course, when we're talking capital markets, one of the things that really sets us apart is this focus on time series data. And the value of structured data, it's paramount. It's the source of truth for us. And now we're talking about bringing in this very different context, the unstructured data through this means. At the technology integration level, Nataraj, tell us more about what it really takes to bring this together. And what is it that we're doing at KX that's so different from what we've seen happening in the market at large? Why are we doing it differently? And what's the value?
Sure, yeah, thank you. So what it just takes a Q developer who has been using Q for maybe several years, who is familiar with the market data, who has some familiarity with the unstructured data. It's not that different from what we have always been doing in the KD plus world, right? So you store numbers, you store text, SIMs and so on. I think what it really has come down to is that people get somewhat intimidated with the whole concept, with the whole topic of like vector database and how do we integrate it with the tick database and so on. But as I just showed, right, with the MCP server and these technologies, it makes things very, very straightforward. Similarity search is nothing but a simple, straightforward MMU, matrix multiplication. So for those who are, KD plus developers, all you're doing is you're taking a vector and an MMU against your embeddings column. The second thing is, there's a lot of new terms that's been floating around. Embeddings is one of the big ones, RAG. And these can be translated into very simple, familiar things. Like embedding is nothing but a list of floating points, right? So if you kind of, take it down to the lowest level, like the primitive, it starts becoming more and more intuitive. I think in terms of KX, one of the biggest differentiators has been we're not just applying this, as is. We're not just going by that hype, okay, we're going to make it work and it's just going to work automatically because we have LLMs. There's a lot of testing that has to happen. You need to do multi-LLM consensus, so you just don't depend on a single LLM. You test and you retest your assumptions, the LLM output using multiple LLMs. And the second thing is, we can't just release things as is. There's a lot of internal engineering and R&D work that goes behind the scenes before any of these products are released, right? MCP server has been there since November of last year, I believe, right? But it took a little bit of time because who knows? What if it's just going to do it like drop the table, like delete, backtick, dot, and it's gone. So that's the kind of rigor that goes into making sure that in a production setting, we will work properly. There's a lot more work left, to be fair, right? There's AI Libs, which basically enables the vector DB paradigm, HNSW, IVF, IVF-PQ, fuzzy search, and all that. But if you start using it, you'll get a flavor for it. But you will also notice that there are more optimizations that you can implement. There's a team working very diligently behind the scenes before there's a general availability of KDBX. So yeah, it's a work in progress, but it's certainly very capable. And in terms of KX, we've been doing a lot of due diligence behind the scenes in order to make it happen properly.
Yeah, thank you. And an observation would be that generative AI has been multiple years in the making. It's now starting to bring value into the context of capital markets, even beyond research. To your point, Bobby, we started where it makes the most sense, but there's a lot of potential there. And I'm wondering, Nataraj, if you could just reflect a little bit on all of those use cases that you highlighted in the context of the trading workflow, trading cycle. Which of those sub-use cases, if you will, are you seeing getting the most traction? Where's the demand coming from the market, as it were, at this point?
Right, yeah, thank you. So the first one is quite obvious, the one that we showed, AI Research Assistant. So you have call notes, you have trade commentaries, you have research reports, you have SEC filings. Instead of having to sift through hundreds of thousands of records, can I use RAG or vector DB, similarity search, to surface the right text, right? I think every single bank I know of, hedge funds, they are implementing some version of this, right? It's not like a solution that puts your systems at risk. It's sort of a productivity multiplier. So you can use RAG very effectively instead of having to do that manual search. What were we doing before this? Keyword search, right? All we're doing now is we have moved into semantic search. So we captured the semantics in the form of embeddings, and we're able to retrieve the right chunks of text. There's a more technicality to this, how to use chunking, the right chunking strategy, contextual chunks, and so on. But that's for the on the tech side. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, very helpful. I wanted to, Bobby, turn to you, if I may, to talk about the path, the journey that you've been on, and how you've developed the architecture for the solution that you're now implementing at scale, in terms of how much it relied on RBC's in-house teams to be able to define what that future state would look like and how to get there, how to build an appropriate architecture or stack for RBC. How much was it about partners bringing to the table something that we might refer to as a blueprint, but that can be small to very large and very complex. And the outline that you gave, Bobby, of your own business is pretty complex, like every organization represented here, but you're at some significant scale. Can you just help us think through that kind of in-house partners getting to the end state? How did it work from your point of view, Bobby?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Step one is in AI and digital innovation, we have our own AI engineers and architects. We also have incredible expertise across Royal Bank. We have a Lumina platform, which is the central place where you want to build all capabilities into that. We have the enterprise that manages the overall architecture. Mm-hmm. And then we have capital markets technology. So step one, kind of 2 years ago, have some great passionate debates on the architecture, the path forward. When you're working with this many talented people with this kind of strong vision and views, step one is to get leverage the culture we have to have passionate debate, hear competitive views, competitive visions, and land on a common AI architecture, which we did after many workshops and many passionate debates. So that's number one, is being able to align internally, which is a big happening. That allows you to scale. It allows for build once, use many concept. It allows for scalability and reusability. Once we landed there and got to a great place, we were able to scale up and scale out quickly. Then we partner with really innovative partners and partnerships with NVIDIA, with KX. There's a number of other partners I won't mention right now, but if we think about that partnership, we are prioritizing the partnerships and leveling up the strategic aspect of it. So our partners and strategic partners, can they help us accelerate execution by 6 to 12 months?
Yep.
If so, what's the client problem we're trying to solve? How much can we scale it up? 8,000 people in capital markets, 100,000 people across the bank. In NVIDIA's instance, they're covering us across the entire enterprise. So it's part one, have the vision internally, lock in on the vision, have all the stakeholders there. We have our architecture committee. We have a big seat at the table when it comes to our AI architecture right out of our group, and then partner with strategic partners to accelerate execution.
Makes a lot of sense. Now, you've been through many years of this journey, Bobby, and I'm asking myself the question, if you were to start that journey again today, maybe some folks are already at an earlier stage than you are now and want to benefit from your experience, what would you be doing differently, or maybe guiding others to do differently to accelerate that path? Obviously, technology's matured, there's more developed solutions out in market, so that's fairly obvious. But apart from that, any particular steps or stages that you, on reflection, you look back and say, we could have taken a month off that, we could have saved another couple of months over here, we could have gone faster. Any learnings from your experience, Bobby, that you think might help the wider team here?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I mean, in a sentence, bolder and faster. Faster, 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 bolder and faster. When you look back, you never do it fast enough. You never break down the barriers and the obstacles fast enough. Bolder and faster is number one. And again, we've made so many mistakes and so many learnings and so many failures and so many failings. So we don't want to be here saying, hey, this is fantastic, but many, many, many failures. What I would encourage, or our approach that's benefited us, is I go back to the cultural aspect. We have an innovative culture. We have some amazing visionaries of the business. How do you have the right forum to align people strategically through the lens of the client, solving problems and scaling results at scale? And if we think about, go back to the end of 24, connecting with James and originally Martin and Michael and the entire NVIDIA team and Clint, we've been able to align with very culturally similar people, united in purpose and mission, united with this sense of urgency and intensity on solving the problem, knowing where we're going, being ruthlessly prioritizing. Prabu's here somewhere. He wanted us to do the execution intelligence framework back then, and said, yeah, it's really important, but we have to be ruthlessly focused right here on scaling, aiding, and across all of capital markets. So the advice is the right partners at the strategic level, united in purpose, know the problem we're trying to solve, and kind of have your formula for success, and then go all in. And now we're at a place now, we have other big initiatives we're going to do together, and we're in cadence, and we can fly.
That's awesome. Yeah. So bolder and faster. Survival of the fastest, we use it for a reason. So thank you for the reinforcement on that. James, I'm thinking about NVIDIA as a partner, and in particular the breadth of capability that you are now bringing to the table, because let's be honest, the technology has application everywhere. But here in this room, we're very focused on financial services, and so are you from your own role and perspective. Can you give us any insight into what you see as kind of the next level of financial services capabilities that we could expect from NVIDIA? If you're seeing traction, and I believe that you are, and we see the potential, I think this room is just overloaded with potential. Where do you think NVIDIA can help us take the next step to move faster, to build on the foundations that have already been laid? But if we look ahead a little bit, what do you see in the next 2 or 3 years?
Well, funnily enough, one of our industry business development leads was going to join today, but she's unfortunately sick. But one of the efforts that we're doing is not even actually touching Gen AI today. It's just accelerating portfolio optimization workflows and being able to bring a faster and faster acceleration to traders. So outside of all this Gen AI talk, we're doing a lot of fantastic work at actually accelerating and continue to accelerate the underlying building blocks of the trading desk, and to make the actual capabilities that you guys are actually relying on every day to run faster, to run more efficiently, to be able to have more capabilities. One of the things that we've actually figured out with the capital markets team at RBC is for even just one of the use cases that we've collaborated on, that we're seeing a timing speed up from 40 hours taking an entire week for doing review down to 15 minutes. What can that actually enable? What is that performance delta now all of a sudden enable that team to actually end up doing? That's actually one of the really exciting things that we're going to be running into and exploring very quickly, is to say, okay, once we start to have these both the SDK optimized workflows with cuVS or cuDNN or CUDA and Cutlass themselves, what are the knock-on effects that are going to happen because of these augmented and accelerated workflows? The other things, I think, obviously, like very, very obviously, we're seeing some adoption with Gen AI tooling and Gen AI capabilities of the banks and within financial institutions, and I think that will continue to grow. But as I mentioned, the real most important thing that we're going to be focusing on is these tools are capable. They can do fantastic things. If anybody's a developer and they go and write something with Claude Sonnet 4.5, and you would say, make me a chatbot that does X, Y, or Z, or make me a game that does X, Y, or Z, it'll generate that game for you. It'll be very impressive in how it's actually able to build that out. But based off of the actual requirements that you might have, it might not comply with all those requirements. It might have a game, but it might not be following all of the rules that you expect it to. And very much that's something that we're seeing today with some of our forefront frontier teams that we're working with in FSI, but we will continue to see going forwards, is that Gen AI is a fantastic tool. It can do a lot of really, really great things. However, you still need to describe your requirements. You still need to describe what your actual objectives are. You still need to encode that and define that explicitly, and ruthlessly check and double check to make sure that your work is actually that the actual models are generating outputs that are actually correct and correct for your use cases. So I think what we're going to be seeing, honestly, I'll give maybe a kind of a boring and somber kind of worldview, is we're going to see continued adoption. The pace is going to be very much guided by how these FSI organizations are willing to look at guardrails and looking to look at architectures from an entire organizational perspective and say, like, okay, we've got these strict guidelines for utilizing LLMs in production. This is an LLMs.txt file. These are the restrictions. This is the guidance. These are the things that we need to be able to find as the bounding box, the bounding conditions for this Gen AI use case in production. Make sure that this complies. I think. I mean, again, even more boring is I think what was it? Elon Musk, I think, even stated that his goal was to make with SpaceX space travel boring. I think probably the next 10 to 15 years, Gen AI is just going to be another tool in the toolbox that augments and improves and accelerates enterprises. Just like a calculator helps and accelerates a student in high school after they finish the calculus exam and they're allowed to use a calculator again. It's just one of those tools in a toolbox that will just augment and improve over time.